There is a big difference between sharing progress and advertising intention. One is built on reality, the other is built on hope. And hope by itself is not enough to carry a dream through the hard part. That is why so many good ideas never survive the first wave of attention. The applause feels nice, but it can also steal urgency. Once people know the plan, the pressure changes. Now you are not just trying to build something, you are trying not to look foolish. And that is a dangerous place to work from. Steven Pressfield's idea of resistance explains why this happens so often. In The War of Art, he shows that the enemy does not always arrive looking like fear at first. Sometimes it arrives looking like comfort. That is how dreams get watered down before they ever get tested. And that is the part most people miss. A dream is fragile in the beginning. It has no proof, no track record, no body of work to protect it. It only has energy. It only has hunger. But the moment you start speaking too early, that hunger can turn into performance. You start telling the story before you have lived it. You start polishing the vision before you have built the foundation. You begin to feel like you are already becoming the person you want to be, even though the habits have not changed yet. That is where the danger lives.
There is a big difference between sharing progress and advertising intention. One is built on reality, the other is built on hope. And hope by itself is not enough to carry a dream through the hard part. That is why so many good ideas never survive the first wave of attention. The applause feels nice, but it can also steal urgency. Once people know the plan, the pressure changes. Now you are not just trying to build something, you are trying not to look foolish, and that is a dangerous place to work from. Steven Pressfield, idea of resistance, explains why this happens so often. In The War of Art, he shows that the enemy does not always arrive looking like fear at first. Sometimes it arrives looking like comfort. That is how dreams get watered down before they ever get tested. And that is the part most people miss. A dream is fragile in the beginning. It has no proof, no track record, no body of work to protect it. It only has energy. It only has hunger. But the moment you start speaking too early, that hunger can turn into performance. You start telling the story before you have lived it. You start polishing the vision before you have built the foundation. You begin to feel like you are already becoming the person you want to be, even though the habits have not changed yet. That is where the danger lives.
Because the mind loves to confuse speech with action. It loves the feeling of momentum without the pain of effort. And once that reward shows up, the work becomes harder in a strange way. Not because the task itself changed, but because now your ego is involved. You are no longer only building the dream, you are also trying to protect the image of the dream. Pressfield understood that this is where people lose their edge. In his view, resistance feeds on anything that pulls you away from honest work, and empty conversation is one of its easiest tools. The more you talk, the more you may feel satisfied with the idea of becoming someone instead of actually becoming them. That is why some people have beautiful plans and weak results. They have already spent too much of the dream in words. There is a reason some of the strongest people move quietly at the beginning. They understand that early work needs shelter. It needs room to grow without becoming a show. They know that momentum is delicate and attention can break it if the work is still soft. This is one of the clearest lessons from The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. Serious work does not need an audience first. It needs discipline first. Because once you understand that, you stop treating every sentence like progress. You stop confusing being seen with becoming something. And you start seeing the truth that changes everything. Some dreams do not die because they were impossible. They die because they were announced before they were built. And Steven Pressfield's warning is simple, but brutal. If you cannot protect the work from resistance, you may never get far enough for the dream to become real.
Most people explain their unfinished dreams in the simplest way possible. They say they are lazy. That explanation sounds honest, but it is usually too shallow. It is easier to say I did not have discipline than to admit what was really happening underneath. Because the truth is, people do not usually abandon something important because they are naturally lazy. They abandon it because something inside them starts fighting back the moment the work gets real. Steven Pressfield calls that force resistance, and in The War of Art, he treats it like a living enemy. Not because it is mysterious, but because it is persistent. It does not need to win fast. It only needs to slow you down, one small delay at a time. That is why laziness is such a dangerous label. It hides the real problem. Lazy is a word people use when they do not want to look deeper. But a dream rarely dies from one dramatic collapse. It usually dies from tiny internal negotiations. You tell yourself you will start after breakfast. then after the weekend, then after things calm down, then after you feel more ready. And every time you delay, you are not just losing time, you are giving resistance another chance to settle in.
This is one of the strongest ideas in Pressfield's work. The moment something matters, the pushback begins. The more meaningful the goal, the more uncomfortable the process becomes. That is why the work you care about most often feels heavier than the work you do not care about. It is not because you are incapable. It is because the task has become threatening to the old version of you. Think about it this way. When a person says they want a better body, a better business, a better mind, or a better life, they are not just asking for a result. They are asking to become someone else. And that change always comes with tension. It threatens comfort, it threatens identity, it threatens the excuse system you have been using for years. So the mind pushes back. It invents reasons to pause. It creates noise. It makes the old life feel safer than the new one. That is not laziness. That is resistance to change. And once you see that, a lot of things suddenly make sense. Why do people get excited when they speak about their dream, but then go quiet when it is time to do the hard part? Because talking is safe. Action is not. Talking lets you stay in the world of possibility. Action asks for proof. Talking gives you a small hit of identity without the cost. Action demands sacrifice, repetition, and patience. That is where the real battle begins.
Pressfield's point is brutal but useful. If you cannot tell the difference between laziness and resistance, you will keep trying the wrong fix. You will keep searching for motivation when what you really need is structure. The enemy does not always show up as panic. Sometimes it shows up as comfort, delay, and the quiet hope that the problem will solve itself. A person who thinks they are lazy will usually shame themselves and stop there. But a person who understands resistance can fight back. They can recognize that every serious goal will trigger some internal pushback. And that pushback is not proof that the dream is wrong. It is often proof that the dream matters.
Pressfield's point is brutal but useful. If you cannot tell the difference between laziness and resistance, you'll keep trying the wrong fix. You'll keep searching for motivation when what you really need is structure. The enemy does not always show up as panic. Sometimes it shows up as comfort, delay, and the quiet hope that the problem will solve itself. That is why serious people stop asking, "Why am I so lazy?" and start asking, "What is resistance protecting me from?" Because behind almost every stalled dream, there is fear of something real. This is where the work gets honest. A person who thinks they are lazy will usually shame themselves and stop there. But a person who understands resistance can fight back. They can see the delay for what it is. They can stop romanticizing the excuse. They can recognize that every serious goal will trigger some internal pushback, and that pushback is not proof that the dream is wrong. It is often proof that the dream matters. That is the lesson Pressfield keeps returning to in the war of art. The problem is rarely a lack of talent or a lack of dreams. The problem is that the work asks for a version of you that does not exist yet, and resistance hates that. So it whispers, it postpones, it clouds your mind, it makes doing nothing feel smarter than doing something imperfect. Everyone enjoys being encouraged. There is nothing wrong with hearing someone say, "I believe in you," or "That's a great idea." Those words can lift you when you're struggling. They can remind you that your dream matters. But there is a line that many people never notice. On one side of that line, praise gives you strength. On the other side, praise starts replacing the very hunger that made you begin. That is where dreams quietly lose their power. The strange thing about the human mind is that it does not always separate recognition from achievement. Sometimes, the moment other people admire your plans, part of your brain begins to feel as though you've already accomplished something. Nothing has actually changed. The work is still waiting. The obstacles are still there. Yet inside, the urgency becomes a little weaker. Steven Pressfield warns that resistance will use anything to pull you away from meaningful work. We usually imagine resistance as fear or procrastination, but in the war of art, it becomes clear that even pleasant experiences can become distractions if they stop you from doing the work itself. Praise can be one of those distractions. Imagine a young man who decides he is going to write a novel. On the first day, he tells his friends. They are impressed. They tell him he has always been creative. They ask what publishers he wants to work with. Some even joke about buying the first copy. He walks home feeling incredible. But something subtle has happened. The excitement he should have earned by finishing the first chapter has already been handed to him for free. The next morning, sitting alone in front of a blank page feels completely different. Yesterday, he felt like a writer because people treated him like one.
Today, the page reminds him that he has not written anything yet. The applause has disappeared, and only the work remains. Many people never recover from that moment, not because they stopped believing in the dream, because they stopped feeling hungry enough to fight for it. Hunger is a powerful force. It keeps you working when nobody notices. It keeps you improving when the results are invisible. It pushes you through boring days, difficult weeks, and disappointing setbacks. But hunger depends on one thing: knowing there is still something to earn.
When praise arrives too early, it can create the illusion that part of the reward has already been collected. That illusion is dangerous.